You're the only human species left on Earth. That sounds normal. It isn't. For most of the time humans have existed, you were never alone. Somewhere on this planet, right now, if you had been born 200,000 years earlier, you could have crossed paths with another kind of human, not a distant cousin species like a chimpanzee or a gorilla, another human, one with its own tools, its own fires, its own way of raising children and burying its dead. And it wouldn't have been rare. At times, there were at least 5, possibly as many as 9 different human species walking the Earth at once. Today, there is one. You. So what happened to the others? Where did they go? And why, out of every version of human that ever existed, is yours the only one still standing? Start with the one you've probably heard of, the Neanderthals. For most of the 20th century, they were painted as the failed draft of humanity. Hunched, grunting, doomed. But paleoanthropologist Chris Stringer, who has spent decades studying human origins at the Natural History Museum in London, helped dismantle that picture piece by piece. Neanderthals controlled fire. They made tools specialized enough to hunt some of the most dangerous animals of the Ice Age. They cared for their sick and buried their dead with what looks unmistakably like ritual. They weren't a failed version of you. They were a parallel version of you, running a different evolutionary experiment at the same time. And Neanderthals weren't even the strangest branch on the tree. In 2010, a single finger bone was found in a cave in Siberia. It was so small, so unremarkable, that researchers almost assumed it belonged to a known species and moved on. Instead, geneticist Svante Pääbo, who would later win a Nobel Prize for this exact kind of work, sequenced the DNA locked inside it. What came out didn't match Neanderthals. It didn't match modern humans. It matched nothing on record. That single finger bone introduced the world to an entirely new group of ancient humans, now called the Denisovans, a population science didn't even know existed until a bone smaller than your pinky proved it. Here's the part that should stop you. Scientists still don't have a Denisovan skull. They don't have a full skeleton. In some cases, they've reconstructed an entire lost branch of humanity almost entirely from fragments in genetic code. An entire population of people with their own lives, their own children, their own extinction, hidden in a bone chip for over 50,000 years before anyone thought to ask what it was hiding. And it doesn't stop there. On the Indonesian island of Flores, researchers uncovered the remains of a human species barely 3.5 feet tall. Not children, adults. Fully grown humans with proportionally small brains who somehow made tools sophisticated enough to hunt animals many times their size. Scientists nicknamed them hobbits. Some estimates place their survival as recently as 50,000 years ago, meaning this pocket-sized human species may have still been alive at the exact same time your own ancestors were spreading across the globe. Isolated on one island, evolving in a completely different direction, while somewhere else you were happening. So picture the map. Neanderthals across Europe and parts of Asia, Denisovans stretching from Siberia into Southeast Asia, Homo floresiensis tucked away on a single island, Homo erectus, one of the longest surviving human species in history, still clinging on in parts of the world, and your ancestors, Homo sapiens, pushing outward from Africa into all of it. Different heights, different brains, different tools, all human, all alive in overlapping windows of time on the same planet. And then one by one, they disappeared. Why? For a long time, the leading theory was simple and brutal. Homo sapiens showed up, and Homo sapiens won. Better tools, better weapons, better social coordination. A straightforward story of replacement, where your ancestors outcompeted every other human species until nothing else was left. It's a tidy story. It's also, according to a growing body of research, almost certainly wrong. Because if Homo sapiens simply wiped out every other human species, those species should be gone. Erased. And yet, when scientists sequenced the modern human genome, they found something nobody expected. Neanderthal DNA, sitting quietly inside people alive right now. Not as some rare exception, but as a measurable percentage inside almost every person outside of sub-Saharan Africa. Some populations in Papua New Guinea and other parts of Asia carry noticeable amounts of Denisovan DNA as well. Evidence woven directly into the genetic code of people living today. Read that again. The species you were taught went extinct isn't gone. It's inside you. This is where the story stops being about replacement and starts being about something far stranger. Somewhere, tens of thousands of years ago, a Homo sapiens and a Neanderthal met. Not as separate species locked in permanent conflict, but as two kinds of human close enough, familiar enough to have children together, and those children survived, and their children survived. Generation folded into generation until the boundary between your species and their species quietly dissolved into something closer to family. Researcher Rebecca Ragg Sykes, who has spent her career studying Neanderthal life in painstaking detail, has argued that the old image of two species locked in a war for survival badly misses what the evidence actually shows. It wasn't always conquest. Sometimes it was closer to absorption. Populations didn't just vanish. They blended, generation after generation, until the lines blurred past the point of separation. So if it wasn't pure conflict, what actually pushed these other human species toward disappearance? The honest answer is that scientists still argue about it, and the evidence points toward more than one cause layered on top of each other. Climate played a brutal role. The Ice Age didn't move in a straight line. It lurched, warmed, collapsed, and refroze in cycles that could reshape an entire ecosystem within a single lifetime. Species adapted to one narrow set of conditions, like Homo floresiensis isolated on its island, or Neanderthal populations specialized for cold weather hunting, had far less room to adjust when the climate shifted again. Population size mattered too. Genetic evidence suggests Neanderthal groups were often small and scattered, which made them fragile in a way large, interconnected groups are not. A disease that a large population could absorb and recover from could devastate a small, isolated one completely. Fewer people also meant less genetic diversity, and less genetic diversity makes an entire population more vulnerable to the next crisis, whatever it turns out to be. And then there's competition, but not necessarily the version you're picturing. Homo sapiens groups may have had an edge in long-distance social networks, trading not just goods but information and alliances across much larger territories than other human species maintained. In a world where the climate could turn against you without warning, having more distant relatives to fall back on wasn't a luxury. It may have been the difference between a bad year and an extinction event. So the truest answer to why every other human species disappeared isn't a single dramatic war. It's closer to a slow tightening. Shrinking populations, harsher climate swings, smaller genetic safety nets, and a rival human species that didn't need to wage war because it was already quietly absorbing them, one relationship, one child, one generation at a time. Which brings you back to the question this all started with. Why are you the only human species left? Maybe that's the wrong way to frame it. You're not the version of human that erased all the others. You're the version that absorbed enough of them to carry pieces of their genome inside your own cells right now, whether you've ever thought about it or not. The Neanderthal gene variants linked to immune response, to skin tone, to how some people process fat in cold climates, all traced back to a species you were taught went extinct tens of thousands of years ago. You didn't inherit an empty world. You inherited a merged one. So the next time you hear that Homo sapiens is the last human species standing, picture it differently. Not a single survivor standing alone in an empty field. Picture a long, slow river of different human lineages, flowing toward each other for hundreds of thousands of years, sometimes crossing, sometimes merging, until every stream that's still moving is somehow, quietly, made of all the others, too. You were never the only human species on this planet. You're just the one still carrying all the others forward.